wow. Oh
Yes.
my goodness.
Yeah. So let's talk for a minute about COVID and custody. And I know that you're not on the family court bench right now, that you have different duties at the moment.
Right.
So there's a lot of disputes. I mean, there's always disputes, but I feel like the number of disputes have increased. And one thing that I see is people arguing about, well, now, schools all over the country are no longer officially in session. We're doing this distance learning thing. So there's
Right.
confusion about how we should be treating time with the children, and especially in situations where both parents are home now, but say normally, one parent may have more
Right.
time than the other because that parent, has a demanding work schedule, but now they're saying, well, I'm home and I can have more time with the kids and I should have more time with the kids. Do you
Mhm.
have any thoughts around that, and how should people be handling, what should they be looking at? Should they
Right.
be treating this as though the kids are in school, or should we be treating this like it's summer now, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I think, our Supreme Court sent out an order recently addressing that issue. And interestingly, though, it doesn't really address, that the issue of, let's say one parent now is home and really could have more time. What our order addressed was, that existing orders remain in effect, and that parenting time and custody and all of that, if it's sort of geared around the normal school calendar, that school we're acting as though that school calendar is still in effect. That school calendar that's published at the start of the school year is how that parenting time or visitation custody is being exercised as it normally would. In a perfect world, I would love to hope that people could come to an agreement that, if both parents are home working remotely, or if one parent, I'm sure there's a lot of situations where a parent isn't working at all, whatever area they work in, is not one that is able to support their employment right now. And, in those situations, in a perfect world, it would be lovely if people could work together and, be a little bit more flexible in that situation, allow, if a parent has the ability to have some more time that they ordinarily couldn't have, to take that into account. Understand that, the kids are all going through this as well. The kids are, this is a sort of a uncertain world, for kids in the sense, they're not in school, they're not with their friends, they're not doing the things that they normally do. And so how can we make it easiest and best for everyone?
Okay.
That would, of course, be the hope. I recognize that that's not always the reality, though.
Exactly. So people are having disagreements. For example, I have one situation where a child was visiting one parent out of state, and then this all hit,
Right.
and so the child has not been put on a plane and returned to Arizona. And I'm a lawyer. I
Right.
can argue either side of this, really.
Sure. Right.
And I know we always have to look out for the best interest of the children.
Hmm.
Um, and normally, at least in Arizona, there are very limited circumstances under which a judge will consider something to be in an emergency.
Right.
So, how do you view emergencies? And would a situation like the one I just described, or one, the kid hasn't been returned home, to the primary parent, would that be considered an emergency? Or can you provide any?
I guess, right. From my perspective, I would like to think that if I were on the bench, that would be considered an emergency. I mean, that, one parent has custody or parenting time or whatever and is due that custody time or parenting time. And, the child is in another state far away and not coming home. And that, I understand. I think you're right in what you say. As a lawyer, you can argue both sides of that. But the fact remains is that, I guess from my perspective, if I were doing this kind of work, every effort would need to be made to try to abide by the normal custody and parenting time orders. And I understand that for a while they were putting people on, going on planes, flying on planes was and is still to a certain extent, somewhat of a unsettling proposition. But I, I've known people that have flown recently, and what I hear is that, planes are very light on passengers right now, and being cleaned regularly and things like that. Again, probably still unsettling, but everything I'm reading, at least from our courts, is that abiding by those custody and parenting time orders is paramount.
Okay. And
So
you guys are there in St. Joseph's County are encouraging people as much as possible to work together and reach agreements if possible.
right, exactly.
And normally what I tell everybody is that if you make an agreement and you don't put it in writing, then it's not a binding agreement. Is there a different view that your courts are have right now, or can people put agreements, or if they reach agreement, should they still be in writing, although they may not be signed off on by the court? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think whatever sort of means you use to do that, if it's, you're emailing back and forth and, you come up with this agreement, I would say that, yes, it's maybe not being signed off on by the court at this time because, especially if you're self-represented, or even if you have a lawyer, it's difficult to get into court to file those things and whatnot. But, if that's something then later you want to have formalized by the court, at least you have some record of the things you've discussed and the things you've agreed on and that you've been able to work out, even if it's not formalized, in a court.
Okay, that's great. Okay, that's really good. So let's, so I'm going to tell you, we, have some comments. We have about 90 viewers on at the moment, which is really amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Thanks you guys for showing up. So